All right, we're going to be that we are live on YouTube and being recorded on. Hello, John.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, Mr. Mayor.
How are you?
I am good.
Very good.
Hope everybody else is good.
Let's see. Okay. Stacy, you're the host on this one tonight, right?
Yes, and it looks like we have everyone here. It looks like we have all 5 council members and all 5 planning commissioners and staff. If we'd like to begin.
Okay. Let me call up my agenda here. We'd like to welcome everyone to the adjourned Joint City Council and Planning Commission meeting of Tuesday, April 27th, 2021. Any information, public comment, you can send it to City Council cityclerk@losbanos.org, or you can send it to planningcommission@losbanos.org. You can view the meeting on the city's YouTube channel. And so at this time, I would like to call the meeting to order at 5:31 p.m. So City Council meeting is hereby called to order, and I will turn it over to Mr. Cates so he can call his board to order.
Thank you, sir. And as chairman of the Planning Commission, I call the Planning Commission meeting to order at 5:31 p.m. as well.
Thank you very much. Acting City Manager Breezy, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
First Mayor. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Thank you, Acting City Manager Breezy. We will now go to a roll call. City Council. I will call the roll for City Council, and then Mr. Cates will call roll for the Planning Commission. Jones?
Present.
Lambert?
Here.
Lewis?
Here.
Yamas?
Here.
Faria? Here. City Council has a quorum. Mr. Cates?
Thank you, sir. I will now call roll for the Planning Commission members. Commissioner Perricone? Commissioner Perricone?
I believe he's muted. Oh, there he is.
He does have a slight delay sometimes with his data. We'll move on to Commissioner Reyes. Here. Commissioner Robinson. Here. Commissioner Yulee.
Here.
And Chairman Cates is here as well. Commissioner Perricone, were you able to say anything yet? I haven't heard you.
Here.
Thank you. We do have a quorum as well. I'll hand it back over to Mayor Faria.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cates. City Council, Chair will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Lewis, I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Mr. Mayor, Yamas here. I'd like to second that.
Thank you. I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Lewis and a second by Councilmember Yamas to approve the agenda as submitted for the City Council. And we'll go through a roll call. Jones?
Yes.
Lambert?
Yes.
Lewis?
Yes.
Yamas?
Yes.
Faria? Yes. It has been approved by the City Council. Now I will turn it over to Chairman Cates.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Planning Commission, I will entertain a motion and a second for consideration of approval of the agenda.
Commissioner Yulee, I move that we approve the agenda as submitted.
Thank you.
Commissioner Robinson, I second the motion.
I got a motion by Yulee and a second by Robinson. I will conduct a roll call vote at this point, and we'll go with Commissioner Perricone. Signify by saying yes or aye. Okay, we'll go to Commissioner Reyes.
Aye.
Commissioner Reyes is an aye. Commissioner Robinson?
Aye.
Commissioner Robinson is an aye. Commissioner Yulee?
Aye.
Commissioner Yulee is an aye, and we'll go back to Commissioner Perricone.
Aye.
Aye. And Commissioner Cates is an aye. The ayes have it, and the agenda is approved as submitted by the Planning Commission.
Thank you, Chairman Cates. We now move to the public forum. Members of the public may address the City Council and Planning Commission on any item of public interest that is within the jurisdiction of the City Council and Planning Commission. This includes agenda and non-agenda items. No action will be taken on non-agenda items. Speakers are limited to a 5-minute presentation, or you may send your comments to cityclerk@losbanos.org. You may drop them off at 520 J Street, or you may mail them to 520 J Street with a maximum of 250 words. Ms. Elms, have we received any emails in the public comment, in the public forum?
No, not that I am aware of, but we will check with Planning Commission Secretary Benetti. Have we received any public comment?
No comments have been received.
Okay, thank you very much. Seeing none, we will close the public forum and move to item 6, to conduct a joint workshop regarding the general plan, land use element, and business park master plan. For that, I will turn it over to Ms. Elms so she can begin the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Council, and Mr. Chairman Cates and the Planning Commission. Thank you for joining us tonight at a joint study session. This is a workshop on the land use element, but specifically the general plan's land use map. We wanted to take this opportunity to check in with the City Council and the Planning Commission on where we are at with the land use map, just to make sure that we are on the same page as the City Council and the Planning Commission, and to also talk about some proposed changes that are really more housekeeping items that we're going to be presenting to you tonight. We also wanted to talk about the business park. We had Bay Area Economics, and we have Matt Coda on the Zoom meeting today that did an analysis for the city of Los Banos on a potential industrial park and the market, just an analysis on the feasibility of that type of business park, similar to Patterson, a mega industrial park in the city of Los Banos. So that's kind of the highlights of what we wanted to talk to you about tonight. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Joanna Jansen from PlaceWorks and her team.
Great. Thank you very much, Stacy. Hi, all. It's great to be here with you again. My name is Joanna Jansen, as Stacy said. I'm a principal with PlaceWorks, and we are the consultant that's leading the team for the city's general plan update. And as Stacy said, I'm joined tonight by my colleague, Cliff Lau, also of PlaceWorks, and also Matt Coda, who is the economist on our team. So let me take just a moment here and get my screen set up for sharing so that I can run through a presentation with you to inform your discussion tonight. Great, thanks for your patience with that. So as Stacy said, we have two major topics that we want to address tonight. First is checking in with you about the proposed 2040 land use for the general plan update as expressed in the land use map. We really want to share some outreach with you that we have received over the past few weeks from several meetings that have been held that the city has hosted to receive outreach. Discuss business park feasibility, and then go through the items from your staff report that staff is most interested in hearing your discussion and direction on. And of course, we'll close just making sure that we're all understanding the next steps in this process. As I'm getting started, just want to be clear that the ideas and the concepts that we're presenting and talking tonight are very much still in draft form, as I think you know, but just to make sure all nothing has been published in terms of the general plan, and that's why we're checking in with you now to adjust and refine these ideas before the draft general plan is published, and then we will have ongoing dialogue after the plan is published and until it is adopted. So these are initial ideas that we want to discuss. This map we can come back to for reference as we go along. This is just an aerial kind of showing the existing city limits of Los Banos. And this is the area within which the city's general plan has jurisdiction. But the general plan land use map covers a larger area than just the city limits, because an important role of the general plan, of course, is to look ahead and anticipate and consider future growth so that it can be well thought out and efficiently served. This, again, is your current general plan land use map. And I know all of the council members and planning commissioners are familiar with the role of the general plan land use map. But again, for the community members who might be watching this meeting, the colors on this map correspond to different possible categories of land uses. And the color of a given parcel on this map determines what is or isn't allowed to be built on that given parcel. And so it's a very important map. It's very important for landowners, and it's very important for the city in describing the vision for the city's future and taking steps to make that vision happen. Here is the current draft of the proposed 2040 general plan land use map, and I'll talk about some of the ways in which it's different. This map, this version of the same map, shows in the pink outlined parcels like this one and these down here. These are the parcels that have been changed from the existing land use map that's adopted and in place today. And we're going to go through the various sources of those changes and some of the specific reasons for proposing these changes. So let me talk a little bit about what the map that you just saw kind of means, and I'll describe each one of these kind of big ideas on the land use map as we go through them. So in this revised land use map, the downtown core of Los Banos remains a mixed-use area that can accommodate retail, offices, residential, and a range of different types of uses, sometimes even in the same building. There would remain a real focus on commercial uses along both sides of Pacheco Road and Mercy Springs Road, and that Pacheco Road corridor would extend all the way to the western entrance of Los Banos. There are a few different very important industrial and employment park nodes around the city, and it continues the existing structure of residential neighborhoods that are really designed to be complete neighborhoods with a range of housing types organized around gathering places like schools and parks. So let's go through kind of each one of those features. The downtown core on the land use map is shown as a mixed use area. That's the purple color. And under the proposed changes, the mixed use area is extended a bit down J Street to incorporate existing uses that are already consistent with use designation. This is a way of both accommodating existing uses downtown as well as encouraging about new types of projects that might come in the future, consistent with the recently approved downtown strategic plan. I mentioned commercial uses along Pacheco Road and Mercy Springs Road, not necessarily exclusively, but the red parcels that you see on this map are all part of the commercial designation. The industrial and employment park nodes that I mentioned are really centered in these places that are circled here on the map. Over on the east side of town, and including this parcel, which I'll talk more about later. Here north of H Street, here in the airport area, and then outside of and to the west of the existing city limits, predominantly south of 152 in Pacheco, but also a little bit north. This is professional office, this pink color. Gray is industrial, purple is what we call employment park, and pink is professional office. So you can see here that this concept would include also an area kind of in the center of this that might provide for some commercial services and park or open space for employees in this future employment area. And then the concept of complete residential neighborhoods would apply to most places in Los Banos outside of these kind of core areas as the city grows. But I've just circled some here that are kind of representative. So when we look at these parts of the map, we see at the center a civic or institutional use in some school, a potential future school site, but it could also be a community center or another type of civic use, often adjacent to a park. You can see that many times these blue and green areas are next to each other, so green is for a park. Perhaps with a neighborhood commercial center, that's the pink color, and then mixed density housing. So this kind of beige or orangey color is a medium density residential area, and then surrounding that is a low density residential area. So this would tend to be your kind of more typical single family home areas. So if you look around the map, you see different ways that those patterns of uses fit together. Sometimes there's more of the mixed medium density residential and less of the low density residential, but we see them kind of repeating around a school and park or public use and park type of configuration, and again, often including smaller nodes of neighborhood commercial areas where residents of these new neighborhoods could have their kind of day-to-day needs met. I've mentioned some of these changes already, but let me go into a little bit more specific detail about some of the 2040 land use proposed changes. Many of these are coming from staff, as staff has interacted with the land use map over the past several years, seeing places where it needs to be cleaned up so that the colors on the map match the uses that are on the ground and in existence today, especially in places where we want to enable those existing uses to continue. And also some requests that have come to us through the process from property owners who have a vision for the future of their property that is in line with the city's vision, and want to make sure that the general plan land use designation is consistent with those ideas. So as I mentioned, the mixed use designations are expanded to the southeast along a J Street. That's the purple color we looked at earlier, to both allow existing uses to remain and also to create opportunities for new projects with flexibility and creativity. We would increase, in addition to changing that where that purple color is applied on the map, the proposed general plan update would also consider increasing the maximum allowed residential density in downtown. So for that residential component of a mixed use project, the maximum would be increased from 18 dwelling units per acre up to 30 dwelling units per acre. That's not including requirements that the state has to allow a density bonus for certain qualifying projects. The general plan land use map as currently drafted also expands the industrial designation in the eastern part of the city. There's a peninsula of city limits that extends east along the north side of Pacheco Road, where AmeriGas is right now. And this would enlarge the industrial designation in that area to continue to allow it to be a job generating area. The new map redesignates some residential sites for high density residential to help meet future demand for multifamily residential and make sure that the city is positioned to be able to identify adequate housing sites in its upcoming required housing element process. And then commercial, as I said, continues to be designated on sites along both sides of Pacheco Road. That would be serving both residents and visitors, and could draw from as far away as the surrounding region, not only limited to Los Banos customers. And we, of course, want to make sure that civic and institutional uses are designated throughout the city to accurately reflect existing uses in places like the cemetery, and make sure that we're allowing for future schools and other public facilities as was Banos population. So with that said, here's the map again. This is the industrial area I was speaking of. Here are some of the civic sites that were added here at the blue sites that you see. Any site that's kind of this darker brown color outlined in pink. Here's one, here's a couple, there's one down here and over here. Those are the places where we've identified for additional higher density housing. And I think that's kind of the majority of some of the changes that I mentioned. I'm sure Stacey will be happy to help us look at any of these specific sites in more detail as you have questions about those.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question before we move forward. Could you go back to the previous screen? Those brown areas that you mentioned highlighted in pink, could you explain again what that is?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So this general plan has 3 different residential designations.
I see it's high density. So are you talking about apartments? What is the staff recommending on this?
Sure.
Or what is your organization recommending?
We haven't changed the existing designations, the residential designations of the general plan. And Stacey, I'm sharing my screen and kind of looking just at the slide, so I'm not able to refer back to the general plan at this point to cite you the exact density ranges, but we can look that up. But it could be apartments, certainly. The way that the general plan and most general plans describe residential types is really more by density than by specific housing types. So it doesn't necessarily prescribe that this has to be apartments or it has to be duplexes or it has to be townhomes, but those all might be examples of the kind of housing that could be developed within this designation.
Okay, and then another question while you have this map up. You had written scenarios on the previous page and made reference to 18 to 30, well, you can go back to the map. 18 to 30 dwelling units per acre in the downtown. Exactly where are you talking about based on this map?
So that's in the mixed use designation. That's the purple color. So you can see here these blocks.
So is that what street is that? Is that I Street or H Street?
It includes both I and H Street. This is H Street here.
Okay. It's a little bit not so sharp, so I just wanted to make sure that I was looking at the correct.
Sure. And then here, this is 7th Street, if that helps, and 4th Street is here.
Okay, so mixed use, are you talking about residential units above the commercial that we have there below?
That's one way that mixed use could be built.
Because I can't imagine that the property owners are looking at making any kind of super physical changes to their businesses on the ground floor. So, I can only assume that that's what you're looking at. I know that, you're talking more in vague terms, but I was hoping we would have something more specific about what staff, what people who engaged in the meetings were looking at, so that you would be more specific to council and to planning commission as to what is being proposed. So, I guess I'll accept it as it is, but I going forward, I think I would like to hear more specifics about what the proposal is. I know that there are designations, but giving examples of what you would like to see or what staff is proposing in those designations will give council and planning commission a better vision about what it is you guys are talking about.
Sure, of course. Sure.
Do we have the authority and a general plan to be more specific?
Well, let me make one fundamental point, which I probably should have made earlier when I was talking about the role of the land use map, just to be really clear. The land use map and the accompanying designations, which I am happy to talk about in more detail, are intended to express what the city both allows on a given parcel. So applying to a parcel does not, in and of itself, force the landowner or a building owner to change what's on that parcel immediately. But what it says is when and if you choose to redevelop your parcel in a place like downtown, this is what the city is going to allow to be built, and this is what the city would like to see built. So it creates opportunities for landowners. Certainly that's the intention of a designation like the mixed use designation downtown. And it sets the envelope for what can happen, but it does not, the city doesn't compel things to happen.
So, Mr. Mayor and Council, what I'm hearing is, again, you're talking about a mixed use designation, but you're also saying what staff would like to see. So again, what I'm saying is give us some examples about what it is staff wants to see. And I know that a general plan is just that, a general plan, but you're intermixing terms that, in my opinion, are a little bit outside of that. So all I'm saying is just give us some examples of what staff is looking at in regards to mixed use, and I'm going to use that purple area in downtown, of what they would like to see in the future. So that's pretty much where I'm going.
Sure. Councilmember Lewis, if I can also add just onto Joanna, that so we are not proposing to change downtown's land use designation. That is already mixed use. It is already purple.
Yes.
There are some cleanup areas off of J Street between 7th and Pacheco specifically, and also on I Street between 7th and Pacheco, that are neighborhood commercial that would not be consistent with what there is today. We have residential mixed with commercial. So it would be more appropriate from staff's perspective to have a mixed use designation versus a neighborhood commercial designation. If one of those houses, were to burn down, for instance, they should be built in accordance with the general plan. So for us, it's more of a housekeeping item. The text of the general plan, we are not proposing to change what the 2030 general plan has as an allowed use, as designated or intended. And I'm just going to read, because today, yes, we're talking about the map and not so much the text of the general plan, but I think it would be important to put that into perspective that we're not proposing to change that. The text would stay the same, but what the text says is that this designation is intended for mixed-use development located downtown, allowing for a mixture of commercial, office, institutional, public, semi-public, and residential uses. Maximum floor area ratio for non-residential uses are 0.25 for retail and 2.0 for office use, with a maximum of 18 dwelling units. That's the only part that we are proposing to change, so from 18 to 30, and that is to give us some additional credit from the housing element. So when we're looking at the balance of between R1 and R3, so between low density and high density residential, we can count mixed use as a part of providing that higher density. So 30 units per acre. For build out projections, it just goes on about build out as using an average. But really the core of why I bring that up is the intended is for a mixture of both commercial and residential, but it also allows professional office, and we're not proposing to change that. So of downtown, the purple that you see is what is there today. The only component, and it's a little hard to see without zooming into that map, but it is only between 7th. There we go. 2 blocks on I and J between 7th and Pacheco. So the rest that is purple would not be changed. And for us, it is so it's your mouse would just be just below that, right there. That's the only piece that we're proposing. And like I said, it's because our existing general plan, it wouldn't be accurate to continue to say that should be neighborhood commercial, mixture of housing and commercial together. So I hope that helps clarify.
That does help clarify. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy.
Very much, everyone. Ms. Jansen?
Thank you. So let me describe a little bit of the recent outreach that we've been doing. This has well-established relationships with a number of very important stakeholders in the area, including other local agencies, property owners, developers, and residents. So we want to make sure that all those voices are included in this process because we really value those relationships and understand that maintaining those collaborative relationships is really critical to Los Banos. So we have had one-on-one meetings with both the Grassland Irrigation District, as we see here, and the Los Banos Unified School District. We also had a stakeholder meeting by invitation. We sent 151 mailers to affected property owners, the property owners whose parcels are outlined in magenta on this map, to make sure that they are making these changes for their parcels. And then last Monday on April 19th, we had a community workshop that was open to all, where we talked about the general plan, what it is. We talked about what each element of the plan includes. And then the majority of the meeting was kind of a town hall style time for hearing comments and questions on the plan. So through those meetings, we've surfaced several very important concerns of stakeholders, including some of those local agencies that I mentioned. Concerns about the potential impacts, negative impacts to wetland habitats, migratory birds, habitat preservation areas, especially when we look northeast and southeast of Los Banos and some of the sensitive wetland areas surrounding the city. That's a significant concern to Grassland and other stakeholders. Similarly, we heard concerns about potential impacts to groundwater supply, groundwater quality, and drainage facilities that are owned and operated by the Central California Irrigation District, CCID. Concerns about negative impacts to farmers and growers on land that's currently the city limits, but is designated for development on Los Banos' general plan land use map. Related concerns about loss of farmland as both a local and a statewide. And the school district pointed out that they have a policy of neighborhood schools, and they really want students in walking to school safely. And so they are concerned about potential future school locations that would be located south of Pioneer Road. There are some of those shown on the existing land use map that's in place today. And with the recent to become more of an arterial, that could present a safety concern for the school district in asking students to road or making it, unsafe for them to be able to walk to school. So those are some of the stakeholder concerns that we've heard so far. Again, this is just a little bit more about the community workshop that we have. I explained a little bit about this already. Some of those comments that I just said were raised at the community workshop. And we also heard residents and community members interested in multimodal transportation. That means around town besides just cars, interest in seeing biking and walking facilities that are safe and comfortable. Definitely interest in maintaining healthcare and especially to a hospital in Los Banos and making sure that the general plan supports that. And we had some conversation about this topic of environmental justice and addressing some of the issues with air and groundwater pollution in Los Banos and making it easier for people to make choices or have access to safe and healthy homes and neighborhoods. So that was some of the outreach from the community workshop. That was, of course, a virtual event, just like this one. So with that, that's the end of the discussion about the land use map. And I'm wondering, Stacy or Mr. Mayor, if you would like to pause there and talk about land use issues, or if you would like me to conclude my presentation by going through the business park feasibility study, and then we can tackle both topics, a discussion at the same time.
Let's use first, and what I'll do is I'll turn to the Chair of the Planning Commission, Mr. Cates, if he'd like to go through his commissioners to see what any questions or comments that they would like to make at this time.
Okay, so thank you, sir, Mr. Mayor. All right. Let's see. Well, I'll just do a roll call for each, and then have our planning commissioners speak as they wish. You don't have to say anything if you don't have anything, but if you do, please make sure for the record you state your name. Commissioner Perricone, you have any questions concerning the presentation at this point?
Questions at the present time.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Commissioner Reyes.
No questions at this time, sir.
Okay. Commissioner Robinson.
Mr. Robinson, no questions at this time.
Thank you. And Commissioner Yuli.
I actually have a couple of questions. First, I was watching the video on the community outreach meeting last week, and in regards to some people, somebody specifically, I believe, had mentioned the Pioneer Project at that meeting. Is that correct? And they were talking about routing truck traffic to that. Is that something that I did hear addressed in that meeting? Correct me.
Yeah, that's correct. We did have, I recall, a participant in that meeting who was expressing their feeling that it's essential to get truck traffic off of Pacheco and onto Pioneer.
That we should be discussing in this meeting.
That is really something that was kind of foreseen and discussed as part of the Pacheco Pioneer Complete Streets project. That was recently before the council, and that I think the council has recently taken action on. So given that action, we would anticipate ensuring that the general plan is consistent with that.
Yeah, I was wondering, because it seemed when we were reviewing the project in past meetings that it was presented more as a neighborhood road as opposed to a bypass type road for trucks. Correct me if
No, you are accurate. It's going to be an arterial. It's planned to be an arterial and intended to east community, but it will not be a bypass. And although there is some desire from locals, and we did hear at that meeting that they would like to see truck traffic use Pioneer Road as it gets built out. But it's not. We are not. I don't think the intent is to force traffic that as a truck route. And quite honestly, feasibility wise, they'll most likely go through town or probably continue to go through town unless it is, more efficient, quicker to get through Los Banos than going through all of the traffic signals. But as the complete streets plan is planned, and that it, like Joanna said, that gets folded into the general plan update to be consistent with the general plan. I don't think it's intended to be a truck route as it's proposed currently.
Okay, yeah, because I was really concerned about that when I heard that mentioned last week, because that wasn't what I thought was going, like you said, the intention wasn't to include that as a sort of a truck bypass, if you will. That is shown, what we saw is, there's foot traffic. It's supposed to be good for pedestrians, for bicyclists, and that just doesn't really seem conducive to use with a lot of truck traffic as well. That would be potentially really dangerous, I would think. Anyway, okay, so and then so then as far as that goes, then really all we're doing is just changing some, like you said, it's just some housekeeping on this, and we're just changing a few of the zoning, correct? And that's it. We're not seeing anything any different.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Stacy, please.
Staff is not changes. It's more just pockets of where we see inconsistencies, as we've been working with this general plan land use map for about a decade now, and there are some inconsistencies that need to be fixed. So we're taking that opportunity, and also with the housing element opportunities for high density residential pockets throughout the community. So we looked for opportunities like that, and then just for inconsistencies where a school needs to be, now it's a school and it was, medium density, where Creekside Junior High is, or areas where, now it's developed with a park. And so a lot of it is just for accuracy purposes.
Thank you. And how, with all this new additional development proposed in the north, as far as more residential units, we don't have any real road projects to address this area of town at all, do we? I mean, any significant one? Something like the Pioneer Project on the north side would be probably very needed over there. So,
sure, and we are contemplating that, not to cut you off, just to give you enough, contemplating that in the circulation element of the general plan, how to get a traffic efficiently through the northern section of the community, and really start to plan for that. Within this general plan land use map, you can see that there are backbone roadways, backbone transportation that are provided down, but we're also reanalyzing and how we can plan for that connectivity. We've looked at, between Badger Flat and 165 and, 165 and Ward, and how to create that loop system throughout the community. So those are definitely high priority plans within this general plan to tackle within the circulation element.
Okay, thanks. And that's it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Yulee. And then to me, Mr. Cates, I do have a couple questions. I don't know if I can direct at both Director Ellens and Joanna, if you guys don't mind. The one is just for clarification, can you define where the city limit is on that eastern side? I mean, what happened to that big chunk? I know, Stacy, you've talked about it before. You may have some new folks on that kind of don't know the complexities of that.
Sure.
Can you just clarify why the city limit kind of zooms up and then cuts across and then cuts back down?
Yeah, we kind of, so you're referring to where the wastewater treatment plant is, Chairman?
Well, yeah, well, actually,
or down further.
Down further, yeah, where the 152 proposed order band is going right through it.
Yes. So that was annexed into the city decades ago. And Holt Brothers is the most eastern of the city limits. So it's up to Holt Brothers at the canal, at the Santa Fe Grade Canal. And we call that a bit of the dog leg, but maybe it's the dog tail out there. And So that is within the city limits. It has been for a long time. Previous to this current general plan, the 2030 general plan, that was designated as industrial. And we're just proposing to go back to that general plan designation with still the planning for the bypass. So the 2030 general plan was the first time that the bypass was really incorporated into the general plan land use map. And but they forgot to designate land already in the city limits, already in the urban city limit line, and with the designation. So we're proposing to clean that up there, as that is, as it's in the city limits. It's technically thought that would be for urban uses.
Right. And then what about that? I'm sorry, Stace. What about the was it the agricultural rural green swath? All of that up all the way up to the almost Quail Street.
Yeah, so the city uses that for it's buffer land between the urban city limits, the urban growth of the city, and the wastewater treatment plant. But we use that for discharge for effluent from the wastewater treatment plant. So we would propose to continue that buffer. We feel that is in the wastewater treatment plan and development. Just to add on to that, Dog Lake, the city, so that's inside city limits, and the city is obligated to provide public services, so infrastructure, water, sewer, out. Those parcels need that infrastructure. So the thought is, if the city is obligated to provide those services, then we should have the ability, if those property owners would like to develop, to be able to facilitate and accommodate that development. Especially, we already have AmeriGas out there. We already have Holt. It already lends to that industrial type use, which would be compatible to a that State Route 152 and interchange at that location, should that ever get developed. So that was really the mindset behind what we're proposing in magenta there.
Okay. Thank you for that. And then the two state highways go through all of this. And I don't need a real detailed conversation of the complexities of that with the state, but does it look like they'll be a proponent for any of this stuff, or do we see anything in the future that that the state may step up and say, well, no, we don't want that, and then kind of overrule in terms of their right of way on either the two highways? You don't see any static from that?
Typically not when it comes to a jurisdiction's land use. Caltrans typically, their standards are going to override, but when it comes to parcels, that's going to be outside of the jurisdiction, typically, of the state's right of way. Okay. So that land use typically would not have major those state routes. The Pacheco is still going to be maintained as a commercial boulevard. Will still have its commercial, and then really where Caltrans gets involved is when we're on a project specific level, that we do intergovernmental reviews, and they participate in providing comments to our environmental documents. So they're partners for sure. But as a part of the stakeholder process of the general plan update, we are engaging with all of those agencies and stakeholders, as well as MCAG, who is our metropolitan transportation planners. So as they are linking the region together in transportation, they are also involved in the process. So we really just try to encompass, all agencies, try to get input from all different perspectives. But really, in a nutshell, we're not as it impacts the highway, we're really not changing. It's really to be consistent with what is there today.
Okay, good. No, I was more concerned about, what the state would say about their right of way on the two highways. So thank you for that. And then my third final kind of clarification is, but you touched on it, MCAG. We're obviously working with the county. Some of this sphere of influence and things like that are in the county, and I'm sure that we've got a good partnership with them too, right?
Yes, so we've engaged with the county, county LAFCO, county planning, and we will continue to have, those discussions, and we'll continue to work through the feedback that we're hearing from those stakeholders.
Okay, because a strong partnership with the county is very important. We're looking at growth and planning for that, right? So, okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I'll go through the council with any questions, comments council may have. Mr. Jones?
No questions, Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Lambert?
Mr. Mayor, I just want to clarify this on one of our last meetings that we had on this, on the urban growth boundary down towards the bottom. Did we move that? We kept the sphere influence right where it's at, but did we talk about moving the urban growth boundary up closer to the Pioneer?
Yes, this map does not show any of the changes to the urban growth boundary or the sphere of influence that the council recently discussed. We do plan to talk to you more about those, but separate from this meeting.
Okay, that's all I have right for now.
Thank you, Mr. Lambert. Ms. Lewis?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just had a question on the statement that was made about at the community meeting in regards to safe neighborhoods. Can someone expand on that a little bit for me as to
Sure.
what the was?
Yes, I would be happy to. Like I said, at the community workshop, we kind of went through the general plan requirements and what each element contains. And as part of that, one of the things we talked about was new general plan requirements for environmental justice. And the concept there is that every neighborhood in California, not only in Los Banos, should be residents should be able to have a safe and healthy neighborhood. And specifically what we're thinking about are environmental factors like exposure to pollution. That might be pollution from industry or pollution from major roadways, or groundwater pollution or other types of contaminants, where we have neighborhoods that have been disproportionately burdened in the past by those types of pollution, and that as a result today experience a disproportionate level of health impacts in their neighborhoods and in their homes. So that was really in reaction to an explanation about relatively recent requirements in state law that the general plan address the topic of environmental justice and the way that that law talks about safe and sanitary homes, and access to healthy food and access to recreational opportunities, and access to city services. And that was the context for those comments.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Yamas?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted one comment, just clarification that we are working on a east-west corridor per se on the north end. Is that correct?
Yes, we've had some discussions. We do have a transportation consultant, Kittleson, that is a sub-consultant of PlaceWorks. So PlaceWorks is working with them in conjunction with the city to identify how we can plan for that within this general plan update. So definitely a top priority within that circulation element. which then once we determine where that will be and how that will work efficiently with the city and through the city, then that'll get folded into this land use map, as backbone transportation so that we can plan for it as development occurs.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just before we move on Ms. Yuli's concern on the Pioneer, and here is from the Pacheco Pioneer Complete Streets Plan webpage, and it is to explore the potential for making Pioneer Road an attractive boulevard, providing a new east-west connection for cars and trucks that would include safe and comfortable facilities for people walking and bicycling. That's a very tall order, but that is the plan. So on that. And then on the map, there at the top there, the Henry Miller Road cuts across there at the top above the old bypass. Why is that gray and not green?
Sure. This right now, this line is the, in this place, it's both the current urban growth boundary and the current sphere of influence. And so the general plan doesn't plan for land outside of those two boundaries. So that's why it's not colored in here. But as we discussed, we would, at the last council meeting, or a previous council meeting, if those boundaries are extended farther north, then the land use map will need to respond to that by thinking about what could go within those revised boundaries.
Thank you very much. I'd like to see the sphere of influence move to Henry Miller Road so we can create that green belt and protect that green belt for the city. I think that's important. Sphere of influence is as important for preventing things you don't want as it is for bringing in things you do want. And so I'd like to see that if possible. All right, gone through council, we've gone through commission. Now we'll go on to the next segment of your presentation. Your very excellent presentation, by the way. Thank you.
Super. Thanks, I appreciate that. Okay, let's forge ahead here. The next section of the presentation deals with business park feasibility, and I know this is a type of development that community members and decision makers are very interested in and interested in understanding. You see in the recent past examples of this type of development. This image is just to convey an example, not the only type, but this is, I think, what many of us picture when we think about a quote-unquote business park. And I know that term can have a lot of definitions. So this is an example of that type of use up the road in Patterson. And I think when we see this type of development happening in nearby communities, it's natural to wonder, could we have this here? What would it take? Why is that in Patterson and not here? And so those are some of the questions that we want this presentation to shed a little bit of light on. The market, when we think about this type of development, let me just go down one more slide here and then go back to that. So to explore some of those questions, BAE Urban Economics, your economist on your general plan consultant team, completed a study that analyzed the potential for a business park that would be connected with Los Banos, located at the interchange of I-5 and 152. And I think, that's specifically because these uses really are looking for a very direct connection to major interstate level roadways. And the primary market for that type of development that they looked at in their study extends from Patterson to Stockton and is centered really in San Joaquin and to some extent Stanislaus counties. So that was what was shown on this previous map. This green outline here is the combined border of Stanislaus and further south San Joaquin counties. So within that area, you've got cities like Tracy, Lathrop, and Manteca that really have the best access to the Port of Oakland via 205 and 580. So this is Tracy, Lathrop, and Manteca in this area here. And then in addition, you also have both Stockton and Tracy, which are pretty large cities with significant labor pool. And of course, Stockton also has access to the Port of Stockton, as well as rail connections to other regional ports. This map has several regional port facilities numbered here with the black number, as well as airports denoted with these white numbers, and then major intermodal rail facilities with the yellow numbers. So this map is just for our reference to give a little bit of a sense of how the market views the region and access to important transportation within that region. And then here, for context, is Los Banos and how Los Banos' geographic location kind of relates to this larger network of transportation facilities and important cities. When we look at that market area that I showed on the map, within that area, there's different ways, of course, of calculating and estimating demand. How much business park space do we expect to be built in the region? Could vary. Obviously, it's influenced by many factors, but BAE estimates between 55 million square feet to 108 million square feet. And in the places where we look within the region, there is currently capacity to build anywhere from 71 to 89 million square feet of that type of development. So you can see that this kind of demand is either lower than the existing capacity or maybe a little bit higher than the existing capacity. But, if you consider that 108 million might be the most ambitious estimate, we really feel like this is probably right now the existing capacity is right sized for what we would expect the demand to be. So that means that we don't see a huge amount of unmet demand for business park space in the region. We think the demand is pretty well matched to the capacity that's already planned. If Los Banos does want to try to compete in this market, I think what's important to be aware of is that it's going to require to bring land into Los Banos that's not currently part of the city. And I think you heard already in this presentation some of the concerns that are raised by other local agencies about potential urban expansion by Los Banos. And in addition to that, when we see places like Patterson who are successful in trying to attract these types of uses, one important ingredient in that success is often upfront investment in infrastructure, electricity, sewer, water, roadways. Everything is in place for those new business park tenants to come in and connect to. And making those investments obviously is very costly, and it's often something that has to be done up front by the jurisdiction in the hopes of attracting a tenant, rather than something that a developer comes in and says, oh, let me pay for this because I want to locate here. They're looking around for other cities who already have that infrastructure in place that they can tie into for lower costs, that would be borne by the developer. And so certainly that's a strategy that some cities pursue, is to make that upfront investment. But of course, anytime that a city decides to pursue that type of approach, you would make it with the recognition that making a that of course doesn't guarantee that you're going to be able to successfully attract that type of development, specifically going back to looking at other labor markets, other locations that might have easier access to rail or air or interstate transportation. Our conclusion there is that it may be most effective, certainly over the next 20 years, the life of this general plan that we're working at, to focus on capturing users that are already part of the Banos area economy, especially agricultural producers and value-added processors. You already have some of these in Los Banos, so we have kind of some clear proof of concept. This is the type of thing that can be successful in Los Banos and a good fit for the existing labor market and land supply in some ways. And that's the type of business attraction that's envisioned on your existing general plan land use map, and that would be carried forward on the draft of the land use map that we're talking about tonight, with those gray and lavender and pink areas that I showed you earlier on the western part of town, on the existing land use map, as well as on the proposed 2040 land use map. So that would not include a revision to the land use map that looks at going all the way out to I-5 and adding new designations there, but concentrating on the existing, the something close to the urban growth boundary and sphere of influence that are in place today and that are shown on that would, as updated per ongoing conversations with the Council on Planning Commission.
All right, thank you very much. I'll go to Planning Commission first. Mr. Cates. Mr. Cates?
I'm here.
There he is.
I was muted, of course. So we'll go through each planning commissioner one by one, and for any questions or comments at this point for this part of their presentation, Commissioner Perricone.
Commissioner Perricone has no questions at this time.
All right, thank you, sir. Commissioner Reyes.
No questions.
Commissioner Robinson.
Commissioner Robinson, so for clarity, you're basically stating that we should stay within the sphere of influence and focus on the local economy versus a business park outside of Los Banos, like near I-5.
Correct. After considering the conclusions of the study, that would be staff's recommendation.
Okay, I just needed that clarification. Thank you.
Okay, and Commissioner Yulee.
No questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I also have no questions at this point, but I do agree that we could really leverage ag tech, if anything else. I still think that I'm not the expert here. No offense, Joanna, but I think that we're hugely influenced by the Silicon Valley, and for us to not be able to look at possibly leveraging that influence somehow, it would be, I think, a missed opportunity to at least look into that. And with the number of, we were just talking about the Fleet Streets Pioneer Project, number of freight vehicles that pass through our town on a regular basis, day after day, for us to, not completely look at the Chico Pass corridor as something that would influence the outside of the agricultural producers and the local existing main businesses out here, which I totally agree. I think let's enhance that and grow that out first. That's the low-hanging fruit. And just a quick comment about kind of landlocked industrial park concepts. I used to have to go to the Best Buy distribution center in Dinuba and work on their printers. And this distribution center is in the middle of Dinuba. There are no regional airports. There is no Bakersfield is like 2 hours away. I don't know the history. I'm sure that somehow city council or somebody coughed up the money to help build out that distribution center, but it is at least 1 million square feet. It's huge. They distribute every product that any Best Buy in the Bay Area, and I believe up as far north as the Oregon border. I could be wrong on that, but it is ginormous. and they don't have before I retired, the road that would take me off of 99 to the Best Buy distribution center, the main road, was a 2-lane road. They've just expanded a good portion of that to 4 lanes, but I just think that there is some comparison or some case study that we could look at in regards to Dinuba. Dinuba is strictly ag, and for them to suddenly, I wish I'd have done some research on it, but somehow they got this ginormous Best Buy distribution center there. I don't know how they did it, but there's always a possibility, right? So anyway, that's just my 2 cents on that, and I'll hand it off to Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Chairman Cates. You might want to give Dinuba a call. Maybe they'll give you some ideas. I'll move on to council. Mr. Jones?
No questions, Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Lambert?
No questions here, Mr. Mayor. I'm good.
Thank you. Ms. Lewis?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I kind of agree with Commissioner Cates, and I was hoping that moving forward in the 21st century that we would branch out to something other than just agriculture. We have a workforce down here that commutes into the Bay Area. There's going to be some tremendous growth in the Bay Area in the .com industry, and I'm sure that some of those employees may be taking advantage of moving to Los Banos due to the housing costs in the Bay Area. But with that in mind, I would hope that we're just not going to designate ourselves only as agriculture. And that's a very important industry in our community. I don't want to take that away. But I think we need to consider other types of industry as we move forward, and not just let it be single-minded into agriculture, because the rest of the world is moving forward in other ways, and we have to be able to move forward as well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Mr. Yamas?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a couple of questions and some comments. In this study and this analysis, how many of the tenants who occupy these distribution centers were contacted for their input?
I can speak to that. So again, Matt Cota, principal with BAE Urban Economics. This study was focused around the industrial real estate brokers who talk to the prospective tenants that are interested in the area. So we weren't able to drill down to the level of talking with individual tenants who are currently occupying spaces within the area, but we interviewed a number of different industrial brokers who work with both tenants that have located within the area, as well as are working on trying to attract more tenants to the area. So we got their input on what kinds of factors were really driving the location decisions made by the different existing and prospective tenants to the regional market area.
I see. So you have no firsthand knowledge or information or contact with any prospective or current tenants?
That's correct.
Okay, so then we only have a partial picture or interpretation from a second party.
Right.
Okay. I think that if we focus on what is recommended, then we're taking the safe option. And I think that we do our residents a disservice by just taking the safe option. There's a tremendous opportunity here. Dinuba, how did they do it? They did it by having a vision, by being bold, by taking risk versus reward. We've done that by being safe here, and what has it gotten us? Low wages, bedroom community, having higher traffic, more smog, more accidents, because other cities, other municipalities have taken risks. They've taken those bold steps, and we suffer the secondhand opposite of that, but we have no revenue to show for it. So I think that I appreciate the study, but I think that it doesn't provide the whole picture. I think that we should continue to be forward-looking and try to capture those markets, because your study says that there's going to be demand for it, and we have access to those corridors. 152 has access to 99, Highway 5, and Highway 101 direct access. So I think we're key, very well located for that. Now I also have one last question. Did not Amazon initially prospect the Los Banos area before moving to Patterson? Is that correct, or is that not?
I don't have particular knowledge of that. What we have heard with respect to tenants that have gone into places like Patterson is that, that distance of roughly 35 miles along the highway corridor does make a difference, as well as the low costs that Patterson is offering in terms of land costs and fees. And so one of our concerns is that if you're having to start from scratch with a business park, as Ms. Jansen mentioned, would require a lot of investment in infrastructure, crossing the various waterways that are in between the current city limits and the highway Interstate 5 corridor. And that would create some significant upfront investment needs, but then also the need to to burden the property in that area potentially designated for business park development with debt that needs to be paid down. And so that adds to that site cost for the prospective user. So that combination of increased distance as well as cost is something that is, this is one of those risk factors that you mentioned that the city would be exposed to if it were to try to go aggressively and create shovel-ready sites out along the I-5 corridor.
I appreciate that. Again, we don't know that. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Llamas.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Ms. Elms, I believe you were here a few years back.
Yeah, I can clarify on Amazon. So prior to, or as they were site selecting and then ended up choosing Patterson, as far as I know, Las Banos was not in the running for a location on the I-5 corridor. However, after Amazon did announce they're locating in Patterson and in Tracy, the city of Las Banos, we met with an industrial developer that develops Amazons, and sat down with them just to see, how it would be feasible to have such a distribution center in Las Banos, and what we would need to do to set ourselves in the right place for a site selector. And so we did have those conversations, but one of the I would say one of the most important aspects of that meeting that we walked away from was ultimately it's going to have to pencil out for that industrial developer to locate in Las Banos. And at that time, we were talking I-5 and 165. So we were trying to account for what it would take to extend that infrastructure to that location. And it was just going to be astronomical and really infeasible for the city to extend city services. It would be a whole new city, essentially by itself, about 9 miles away from the urban city limits of Las Banos. So that's where then the mindset shifted to I-5 and 152. But even so, as Matt has, alluded to the cost of that infrastructure, and then Joanna talked about the stakeholders. So it's going to be an uphill battle. I don't think from, a staff perspective that we're willing to give up the battle. We still believe that if a site selector were to look at Las Banos and say, hey, you're in the running, we would entertain that any day and every day to have that type of opportunity in Las Banos. The feasibility of Los Banos, though, planning for that, it would take years of building that infrastructure, extending that infrastructure. We do have the waterways that we would have to deal with. And I think really BAE's study just puts it into perspective that Los Banos, you have some lofty goals, and it's just kind of it's a reality check on, well, this is really what the market demands. But I would say from a staff perspective, we're never, going to give up planning, and we're always going to be trying to look for those opportunities to have more employment here in Los Banos. And if we can compete with Patterson and Tracy and next on the I-5 corridor, we're going to continue to do that. But with that being said, it's a lofty goal. We have some obstacles in front of us. And for this general plan, we're gonna continue as charted, but with, we're not going to give up on the city's goals. I just want to reiterate that.
Well, I think that's comforting to hear, but again, I think that this study doesn't provide the full picture, and what it tells us are things that we already knew, that it was going to be a very expensive proposition, and there's no guarantees, but. I just think that we can't allow these no's to get in the way of our ultimate objective, and that's to improve life and society and uplift our residents' standard of living. And we do that by being bold. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Ms. Elms, I think that brings us to the end of our presentation. Did our guests have any further conversations?
Well, I think we did have just some discussion items that we wanted to make sure to just check with you on. The discussion so far has been very fruitful, very much appreciated. I've been taking lots of notes to make sure that we're hearing your questions and concerns and direction. And there were a couple of specific things that we just wanted to check in with you about, and it's these things on this slide. So when we think back about the land use plan and our discussion about the business park feasibility, these are really the existing big ideas from your current general plan that's adopted and in place today that we really see as being carried forward by the 2040 general plan land use map that we've presented here. So wanted to check in with you about these and see whether or not you agree with these, or if there's any of these you have concerns about or want to discuss more fully, we could do that. So the big ideas include that the general plan would anticipate that the airport is relocated outside of the planning area, and that that area instead would get that kind of light purple employment park designation that we talked about earlier. Similarly, it would anticipate the hospital relocation to the west side of Los Banos Creek. We have heard throughout this process that it's important, critical to continue balancing Los Banos as a housing, place for new homes and neighborhoods with additional jobs. We've just been talking about the importance of that. And that's part of what's driving the extensive employment park and industrial and office designations on the west side of the city that would be carried forward. We want to continue the practice of integrating future school sites into new neighborhoods. Obviously, we'd be doing that in coordination with the school district. We touched on the industrial designation on the east side of town, over in that dogleg or dogtail that we were talking about within the existing city limits at the San Luis Canal. But we want to kind of confirm the council understands and is council and planning commission are comfortable with that designation. And then we would continue to plan for the future State Route 152 bypass on the north side of town, that big dark gray arch that goes over the top of the land use map. And within that bypass designation, the whole point of it would be to preserve land in the event that a bypass is constructed in the future. I think all of us in this meeting understand that's not something that the city would do unilaterally. That takes investment by the state. And so we can't make that project happen on our own, but if we want to preserve the opportunity for that project to happen, we would do that through the bypass designation. And so within that designation, we would continue to allow farming as an existing use, but would not allow any new structures that might interfere with future construction of a bypass, including structures related to ongoing agricultural operations. So that's those are the big ideas, and we'd love for any feedback that you have. And again, especially if you have hesitation about these questions, concerns, don't agree with them, now's the time to share that with us.
All right, thank you. Well, let's go through our boards. Mr. Cates, if you want to go through your commission and see if there are any items on there that they might not, that they may want not to be included on this big ideas.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We'll go to Commissioner Perricone. Any comments or feedback regarding the big ideas to carry forward?
About this hospital, the cost of a new hospital, that's very expensive. And then you have it staffed with good doctors and nurses, that's expensive also. Where's this money gonna come from to move a hospital?
So this would be to continue to plan for a new hospital or the relocation of the existing hospital, but the intent is to plan for it, not that the city would build it. That would be private investment. A hospital would, either our existing hospital would relocate or a new operator would come in. And so the city is just continuing to plan for that. And as that new medical facility would grow, we see that as a great opportunity to increase our median household income. You know, we see as medical uses come in, that would also provide additional uses to the community. But then as doctors locate and medical professionals locate in the community, it helps elevate the community as well. So the city sees that as really a high priority, and be able to plan for that, as we're really the regional hub for medical uses on the west side of Merced County, and to continue to be able to facilitate and accommodate the trade area, we will need to plan for either a new hospital, a relocation, or a new hospital.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Perricone. We'll go to Commissioner Reyes.
No comments, sir.
Thank you. We'll go to Commissioner Robinson.
Commissioner Robinson, I know this is high-level planning and it's still being thought out, but where exactly in those pink areas was there a thought that the airport would possibly be relocated? That's A. B, same with the hospital. And those are my two areas.
So I can answer on the airport relocation. So we're actually proposing that it would be outside of the planning area. So not anywhere on the city's sphere of influence or our land use map. And that's because we don't want the airport to continue to be in the way of the city's progress in urban development. Airports in adjacent or into close proximity to urban uses, they typically don't mix well together. So we would want to plan for that outside of the urban, really outside of our planning area. So that's why you don't see it on the map. And where we have been studying for the past several years is on near I-5, but southwest of the city's planning area. And that would be ideally, in an area that's not prime ag land, also would be a part of that consideration. So then on the question, we don't see the airport really necessarily here. It would be right off of this map. And then on the hospital, it would be near the college. So that's where that big blue area west of the creek. Yes, that's exactly where, and that's just being carried forward with the existing 2030 general plan. We'll continue to plan until such time that we get some definite project level specification of where an operator would locate, or the existing hospital would relocate.
And one final thought on the airport cleanup. Mm-hmm. Have we thought about tackling the cleanup? Because we know cleanup of an airport it's a task.
Yes, so we have had early in the early 2000s, the city of Las Vegas did analyzed the feasibility of moving the airport. So this isn't a new concept. It's been something that's been really a part of the city's plans for a very long time. And so at that time, they did study what it would take and where those contaminated areas are. So they have been identified. We do have hot spots. So we know generally, back in early 2000s, what that dollar amount would be for cleanup. But the thought is that area would be redeveloped, and that would just probably be a part of the cost of the land. But that would be a very big if we are able to relocate the airport and work with the federal government to be able to do so.
Thank you, Director Elms.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Robinson. We'll go to Commissioner Yulee.
Looks like the two questions I wanted to ask have been addressed by Commissioner Robinson's questions. So thank you. I don't have any further questions.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Yulee. I do have one question in terms of the big ideas carried forward. The junior college isn't listed. I know that is county, obviously, but they're there. They're within our sphere of influence, and my hopes and wishes would be that they have some game plan to expand campus. I know that I don't know what the plan looks like on a map, but I know that they should. Any wise developer would have said, "Yeah, we need this much land because we plan on the future expansion." So, just a short comment on that, Director Elms.
Yes, that is a part of the big blue area on that west end, and the thought in why the hospital is thought to also be locating in that general vicinity as well is to have that partnership between the college to provide vocational training for the hospital. So that is why we have planned really that large area. So that does encompass the existing college and their existing buffer land. And then also because the college is just a fraction of what you see here. And then the hospital would be, the remainder. Right. But, maybe there's an opportunity for, as an operator at a hospital were to come in and say, you know what, we really want the highway frontage. So there would be opportunities. A general plan is a living, breathing, planning document of the city, and that we would possibly be able to change designations through a general plan amendment. But for right now, as best as we see it, we think that the two operators, they would work very harmoniously together, and that's why we planned that area to be with the college and the hospital.
Okay. Very good. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Chairman Case. And if we had a big hospital, wanted to come to town and build a big hospital someplace, something tells me we wouldn't mind entertaining a general plan amendment if it weren't exactly where we had planned for it. That's definitely something we are all looking forward to sometime in the future, sooner the better. I'll go through council now. Mr. Jones?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. With regards to continue to plan for a future bypass on the north side of town with no new structures in the bypass designation, will we be able to put, say, a frontage road in there or something similar to like what Pioneer Road is? So if it takes, say, 30 years to get a bypass in, maybe sometime between now and the next 30 years, we'd still be able to use that space to direct traffic around town. We're going to need some sort of road up there that's more of a local road that's not a bypass. So can we accommodate that in that space as well?
Sure can. It is a little rough to see on the existing general plan land use map, but it does plan for a frontage road. And the thought was, should the bypass get developed, that the local traffic wouldn't have to get onto the bypass. Local traffic would be able to use the frontage road. So that is a concept that is being carried forward. And then when we are saying no new structures, that is because a comment was brought up at the stakeholder meeting, and it was actually a comment, I think, of the Farm Bureau, in that if we're going to allow agricultural uses, would we allow a barn to be built? And the response to that is, farming the land and continuing to farm the land wouldn't be an issue, but building a new structure that would be in the way of the bypass, the way of the development of the bypass, would be counterintuitive to the city trying to preserve that area for a bypass. And so our response to that was, no, we wouldn't allow new structures. And that's why that it's phrased in that way. It's really in response to agricultural uses having a new structure. But roadways and agricultural uses, anything that's not of an actual building structure, the intent is that would be an allowed use in that area.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Mr. Lambert?
I am, Mr. Mayor. I am all for let's keep these ideas going forward. But definitely, talking in the past, the relocation of the airport, one of the big items. I'm like you, also the hospital. If we can get one of those big companies to come down and say, hey, we'd like to build a hospital. But the continuation of looking to possibly not the bypass on the north side of town. I'm like Mr. Jones. I think we're going to need something sooner than later, with the north being such more residential up in that northern area than it is down on the southern area. I believe we definitely need to look for something up north to kind of reroute some of the traffic from downtown to those northern part of residentials. That's all I got, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Lambert. Ms. Lewis?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This question is for Ms. Jensen. I think Mr. Lambert had brought up earlier in the presentation about the council's movement of the urban growth boundary line from where it currently shows on the map to Pioneer Road. And maybe I missed it, but could we touch on that a little bit? Because we did make some changes to boundaries on the southern end of our land use map.
Sure, I can start, and then certainly welcome Director Evans to add on at any point. We did talk about potential changes to both the urban growth boundary and the sphere of influence in an earlier meeting with the council. And that's also part of what triggered some of the comments that you heard earlier that I described in terms of the feedback that we've gotten from stakeholders concerned about, the potential expansion of the city or potential changes to those boundaries in ways that might affect neighboring agencies or their missions. And so that's part of why we wanted to bring those back to you today. And I think we anticipate that the next steps with the boundaries would be for staff and the consultant team to take a real careful look at them in light of the feedback that we've heard from stakeholders, as well as the feedback that we've gotten here tonight in this additional conversation, and then schedule a time to come back to you with a revised map that reflects the input that you've offered us and the direction you've given so far, for a subsequent discussion to follow up on those ideas and make some decisions about what boundaries the city would like to show in the draft general plan that we plan to publish this summer.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis. And Mr. Llamas?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just two items. Would continue again to echo sentiment for a northern east-west corridor, whether that be a frontage road or something that Director Elms had mentioned. But that I would like to see as a big idea carried forward. And two is the access by bicycle or foot to the college. Would really like to see something a little bit safer, a little bit more user-friendly, more accessible for the college students and those accessing that campus. Thank you.
I believe, if I'm correct, Ms. Elms, that the part of the Measure V money is building sidewalks and sidewalk bike path to the college from the city. Am I correct there?
Yes, so Measure V funding has been allocated for the Merced College Trail. It'll be from Badger Flat to the college, and there has been some conceptual studies done, and now it's in the design phase of it. So there is an engineering group that's working on designing that, and then the next phase would be construction. So it's going through its process, and funding has been allocated for that.
Very good. And Mr. Llamas, we will keep an eye on that to make sure that project gets finished, because it's a very important project.
It is, and I just hadn't heard anything about it, and so, but thank you very much, Ron.
Yes, thank you for bringing it up. So I get, it's been a while since they've discussed it at MCAG, but I'll check, the next time I check in with MCAG, I'll check in on the progress on how they're doing. And we keep that going. As far as on this, all this stuff is looking pretty good. The airport relocation is, there's an old saying, stars, ideals are like the stars. We guide by them, but we never get there. And the airport relocation is a very, very costly thing, and because the FAA is so strict about doing it. And it's good to keep it there. And it's like it's one of those stars we'll keep guiding on, because we do want to ideally, have a better location for our airport. But the Federal Aviation Administration makes it very, very difficult. If you're going to move an airport, you have to be able to open the new airport before you close the old one. You can't be without an airport interim. And they're very strong about that. So, but we want to continue working on that. This hospital, Los Banos needs a new hospital, needs a larger hospital. That's something we need to pursue. This idea, there's a good demand, seems like, for these larger industrial uses. Chabon Concepts is our industrial headhunter. They have told us that intermediate, middle-sized industry is what we can look to attract. I wouldn't mind, though, having a conversation with them to let's see if they can take a look a little further on these big ideas, and see, once again, it all comes down to the cost, penciling out, and maybe we can have them take another look and see if there's a possibility. Because when the first idea of that industrial park was 165 and 152. Well, there's a big water problem there. There's not a reliable water supply, as I recall. And so then the city would have to plumb, city water all the way out there, which is 9 miles. That's a huge expense. The other side, the western junction, something else we can look at. Water is an issue there too. I can remember, Santa Nella solved their issue. I remember looking at houses up there that were, their water came from fire hydrants. And so it was water is a big deal. So let's have a look and see if our headhunter has had any progress and maybe can pursue something bigger for us. Considering the fact that our council wants that, the people want it, our planning commission wants it. And I think it would be worth it to do that. Planning for I like Mr. Jones's idea of a frontage road there, around the north end of town. Right now, more and more people are going all the way to Henry Miller. I'm getting complaints about the heavy truck use on Wilmot, and particularly Wilmot and some on Overland. That's getting more and more use. And so that northern east-west artery is important. And we know that big bypass isn't going to happen anytime soon, so it's up to us to plan for that. That's a really good idea, that idea of building an arterial around the city. And everything else, I don't have anything else to add there. I think that we've had a good presentation, and we've had a lot of information, and I think we're moving in very good directions. And I'm very pleased with all the work everyone has done. And we will continue moving forward. And our next step is going to be to move to adjourn. If staff and consultants have nothing further, then I'll go ahead and
Mr.
move
Mayor,
to adjourn.
I did just want to
I'm sorry, Ms. Jensen.
very briefly these next steps.
I'm sorry. I didn't realize we had one more slide.
That's okay. Just very briefly, want to make sure that everybody knows where we're going from here. Thank you very much for your direction and your discussion tonight. This is very helpful to us. We do anticipate continuing one-on-one stakeholder meetings. We have other agencies that we want to make sure we check in with as we move forward. Again, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, we anticipate coming back to the council to follow up on your discussion about boundaries and bring a revised map back to you for your consideration. And we want to make those decisions and have those conversations before we publish the draft general plan, which we anticipate doing sometime this summer. That will be accompanied by the draft EIR, also published over the summer. Those will be out for public review and additional discussion and deliberation, and then gearing up for adoption hearings towards the end of this year, late 2021. So that's the roadmap of where we're going from here. And thank you very much. In particular, I just want to say that I really appreciate, we didn't really bring forward a lot of circulation related items to you tonight, but clearly the land use map has very critical connections to the transportation infrastructure and the way that people get around town. So I very much appreciate that the Planning Commission and Council are very sensitive to those items and really pushing us to make sure that we're exploring those and that we're developing those two things in tandem. So thank you for that.
Okay, thank you very much. And Ms. Elms, thank you for your excellent work tonight in coordinating our consultant for this presentation. I want to thank everyone for joining us, those of you that joined us on YouTube. Be part of your city. Let your planning commissioners know, let your city council know what you want. And we are here to serve your needs. And I'm very pleased to see us doing it in a very excellent way. My agenda shows that City Council would adjourn first, but I think it should be Planning Commission should adjourn first and then City Council. So I'm going to reverse that. I'm going to ask Mr. Chairman Cates to go ahead and entertain his adjournment procedure, and then we'll do City Council.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate it. Before I adjourn, I wanted to also echo the thanks to staff. As always, you guys do a great job. I think you guys need to be paid more. And then also big thank you to PlaceWorks and BAE for your continuous development of our needs and analysis. We definitely appreciate it. Hopefully the feedback has been taken to heart and you guys can make note of what we've all been given to you today. Anyway, great presentation, Joanne, and appreciate that too. With that, I will adjourn the Planning Commission meeting at 7:19, and we'll see the Planning Commissioners tomorrow at 5:30.
Thank you. I believe you need a motion, second, and an action item to adjourn.
Do we?
I always do for City Council.
Oh, all right. Have we ever done that? I don't think we've ever done that as commissioners. But all right, I'll entertain a motion.
Okay, I'll move that we adjourn the planning portion of the meeting tonight.
Okay, thank you,
Commissioner Robinson.
Thank you, Commissioner Yulee. Thank you, Commissioner Yulee, for the motion, and Commissioner Robinson for the second. And I'll do the roll call. Commissioner Perricone.
No, thank you.
Was that a yes? Adjourn?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, thank you, sir. Commissioner Reyes. Commissioner Reyes is frozen. Commissioner Robinson?
Yes.
And Commissioner Yulee?
Yes. Too.
And Commissioner Cates is yes. We did not get Reyes. Oh, Commissioner Reyes, you're back.
I'm back. That technical difficulty. Sorry about that.
It's okay. And your vote for adjourning?
All right.
Okay, we got an aye. So the motion passes, and the Planning Commission will be adjourning at 7:21. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Motion for council.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Lambert here. Make a motion to adjourn meeting with no action to be taken.
Thank you, Mr. Lambert. Do I have a second?
Mr. Mayor, Yamas here. I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Yamas. I have a motion by Councilmember Lambert and a second by Councilmember Yamas to adjourn the meeting. Roll call. Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Ms. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Yamas?
Yes.
Faria, yes. Meeting adjourned. City Council meeting adjourned at 7:22 p.m. Thank you, everyone. We'll be seeing you all again soon. Have a good night.
Night.
Good night.